dealing with creditors, right, and negotiating and all that fun stuff. But I thought it would be great to start with a story, and I know you have a lot of those. So please share one of your best.
So I have a great creditor story from back in 2008. So in 2008, when we had built up my healthcare company, as many of you know, and it was getting destroyed overnight because all of our clients were the biggest companies in America, Washington Mutual, which was a big bank at the time, had filed for bankruptcy and got bought by JP Morgan Chase. Washington Mutual was our second biggest client. And at the time, you know, every day there's chaos going on, and we're reading the Wall Street Journal and clients are going bankrupt and we're trying to figure out a business. We have 500 employees and I get a call. So money is like, we have $1, we need 10, and multiply that by many, many, many millions. Whereas, you know, a month earlier we were highly profitable and right, we needed $10 and had 20. And I get a call from a lawyer at JP Morgan Chase and he says, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. We just bought Washington Mutual and you owe us $5 million. I was like, okay. He's like, "We bought Washington Mutual and as part of your program with them, you would give them rewards like points programs. And this doesn't happen anymore, but back in the day, points used to expire, right? And they don't really expire now as much, but when they would expire, they would pay us for the points. And if people didn't use them for 2 years, they expired." And JP Morgan Chase said, "We're now in bankruptcy with Washington Mutual. And if you may know something about bankruptcy, bankruptcy is all about equity. They don't care what the contracts say. It's all about what's right and wrong for the business. You owe us all that money over 10 years for all of those expired points." Now, we already had $1 and needed 10, and I got some guy calling me up saying we need $5 million more. So I said, "Hi, I'm Michael. Nice to meet you. Used to be an M&A lawyer and has done a little bankruptcy in my day, so I know what you're talking about." And I said, "So here's the thing." I said, "I don't have $5 million. I wouldn't give it to you if I did have it. And here's the thing." And he said to me, "You know, and all I've got 100 lawyers in a basement that all we're here to do is to get as much money out of Washington Mutual as we possibly can." So I was like, "I'm not giving you $5 million. And I said, "So here's the thing. About 100 yards from me, there's a fulfillment center where we send out these rewards. Those rewards are gift cards and debit cards. And back in the day, you actually shipped them." And I said, when I get off this phone call, I'm going to call them up and tell them to stop shipping those rewards the minute I get off this phone call. And the next thing I'm going to do is going to call the Wall Street Journal and I'm going to tell them that JP Morgan isn't paying its employees. Because if you remember at that time, you'd have these announcements in the Wall Street Journal that it says, you know, GE is going to fire 1,000 people and their stock would go down like 40%, right? And right, because he was just coming at me. And I said, "Let's look at your stock price." So I'm like, "Let's go online, look at your stock price." "Well, JP Morgan's worth 40 billion. I was like, "I bet you I can move your stock price 1%. What's 1% of 40 billion? It's 40 million. I was like, "So here's the way I see it. You say you owe me 5 million, right? Or I owe you 5 million. You owe me 40 million. You owe me $35 million. And he pauses and he goes, "Okay, that's pretty good." And I said, "Listen, we want to continue to serve and send out this stuff and to make sure that your employees are being cared for. But this idea that in the midst of this crisis, you're going to come to a vendor and say, we're going to go back 10 years is ridiculous." And I said, "So here's what's going to happen. Like, I'm going to go over there and tell them to start stopping because I know you're going to lie to me now. You're going to say, no, it's all good. We're not going to sue you. But I assume you're going to lie to me because you're JP Morgan. I'm going to go tell them and stop until we sign a settlement agreement that says you're not going to go after us and we're going to continue to ship this to your current employees. And we're going to do that today." And he says, "Michael, we can't do that today. We're JP Morgan." I was like, "You just told me you have 100 lawyers in the basement that all they're doing is sitting there trying, like, get one of the lawyers to drop it." And literally in an hour, we signed a settlement agreement. So one of the things that you realize, and we'll talk about today, now I'm acting like I knew that was going to work, right? Like I didn't know that was going to work. But one of the things we're going to talk about today when it comes to negotiating with creditors is a lesson about leverage, right? And how leverage is certainly incredibly important, in fact, cornerstone to winning negotiation with creditors. So that's my story.
Great story. And now, you were an established business, but think about somebody who, was a smaller size and somebody like that coming to them. I mean, you would have been like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't have leverage, and I'm gonna talk about that. Okay, so before I get into it, we have some a request of everybody. We are every day, as you probably know, at Lonely Entrepreneur, trying to do better and better and better about how we serve you. And so we have put together essentially a survey which asks us to give you a bunch of information about you and your businesses and the things that you're accomplishing and moving forward on, so that we can take that and continue to improve upon what we're doing. We will never use this information other than to improve upon the business, right? You'll never be identified with this information. And for any of you that complete this, we have a $25 gift card to the restaurant of your choice. So we've got this great program with national restaurants where you get a code via email and you can take it to one of thousands of restaurants and it's worth 25 bucks. So if you guys could please take the time, there'll be a QR code and a link that we'll provide to everybody. And if you have colleagues in the programs that you're in that, they have to be involved with Lonely Entrepreneur, because we're asking you to say, how are we doing with the services and what can we improve upon and stuff like that, feel free to pass it along as well. Okay, cool. I want everybody, over the course of the 45 minutes we have left, I want people to make sure that they chime in with the specific challenges they're having with creditors, right? And with their vendors, because obviously we're in a difficult time now, and this is an issue that's top of mind for lots of people. So let me just give you a little bit of a framework of why do you win a negotiation? Why are you able to accomplish something in a negotiation? When I was in law school, Northwestern Law School is known for negotiation as an area. And I'll never forget this. What the professor said was, think of a pie chart. And when you think of that pie chart, what is the criteria of that pie chart that says, I'm going to win a negotiation? Okay. And when I say win, I'll talk about later, we're not trying to decimate the other side, right? You're trying to come to a win-win. But how do you win? And how do you win when a lot of times you don't hold all the cards? Anybody can bet big when you have all the cards, right? It's when you don't, which is the way we feel almost all the time, right? Is if you think of starting with 100% of that pie chart being leverage, what leverage do I have over the other side? Okay, think about what I did with JP Morgan, right? I created leverage. I had none, right? They have 100 lawyers in the bait. Like, I created leverage, okay? So what is that leverage? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, if when you interact with someone, they demonstrate that they're reasonable, right? If they demonstrate that I'll give you this for you giving me that, then that pie chart can change. It can be part leverage, part there's a reasonable person on the other side, right? They're a good partner. We've known each other. There's a relationship. All of that can be good. But how many of you have gone to your landlord and say, hey, landlord, I know we've known each other for 5 years. We've been friends. We've gone out to dinner together. And I really need some help because we're in the midst of COVID. And the landlord said, well, I know we went out to dinner. I know we have a relationship, but you still have to pay your rent. Doesn't make them bad human beings. Well, sometimes it does, but right? But the point is, you have to start with leverage, right? So in New York City, I'll give you an example. That leverage might be, listen, shops are going out of business every day. I'll just leave. It's better for me to just leave, right, than it is to continue to pay the rent because it's not worth it for me. And then as a landlord, you have to say to yourself, oh, that person has leverage. If they can just leave and their rent is $10, and I say $10 or nothing, they'll be, yep, we'll just walk away. Now, I know people sue each other and there's guarantees, and it's not always that simple. Okay? So start with the idea of what leverage do I have? And probably more importantly, how do I create leverage? Because a lot of times you don't hold all the cards. Okay? How do I create leverage? In my example, I created leverage. I didn't have it. Okay. How do you create leverage? Okay. Some of the leverage that you have, okay, comes from the reality of the world, right? Of what we're living in with respect to COVID, right? Some of the things that are happening now are easier, right? Your mortgage company says you'll defer this, right? You're like, there are programs that have been put in place. They're winding down, right? That give you opportunities to negotiate with creditors, right? And I'm going to get into some techniques. And Victoria, let's make sure that we point everybody to the Entrepreneur Survival Guide, because there's a whole section, there was a whole day we did on just doing this in the midst of COVID that I think could be really helpful for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I continue to ramble on, does this make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions or comments about their specific circumstances that we want to get into?
So I have a question, but you might want to, I don't know, now or a little bit later. Besides creating leverage, how do I know what is kind of the winning side for me?
Yeah, the winning side comes first and foremost from leverage, right? It comes from the fact that once you have leverage, then you have the option to give back more, trade, right? Give things away. So I'll give you an example. Everybody is pitched marketing firms, right? Marketing firms come to you and they say, we want to, offer you marketing services. Well, we all know, and they all know, there are a million marketing firms. Okay. So if you say something like, we really appreciate you presenting to us. In the next 2 weeks, we're evaluating a bunch of firms. We'd like to have you come back and give your best offer. The leverage you're creating, it's not rocket science, is they're competing against multiple people and they know they could lose if they don't put their best foot forward. Okay. Same thing is true with employees, right? It's in some parts of the country, employment is great. In other parts of the country, it's not, but there are a good amount of people looking for work, unfortunately. So when you're bringing on employees, you have leverage, right? You should never, how do you eliminate leverage? How do you put yourself in a worse situation? Tell an employee or a vendor that they're the only one you're considering, right? You should always talk about it in the context of you're running a process, right? You're running a process to choose a marketing firm. We're looking at a lot of firms. Now, you may have a favorite, but you create leverage for yourself and the ability to negotiate with new vendors or new employees by making them understand that they're part of a competitive process, right? In which someone else could always outbid them. Okay. Now there's a flip side of this that many of you may be saying to yourself, but wait a minute, I'm a vendor and I'm talking to customers. How do I deal with that? And that's a topic for another day.
Michael, so is it fair to say that, just like you think about creating leverage, if you don't have any, that one should think about what is kind of a win mean for them, right? In other words, what is the end result that you want to get to, right, in these negotiations?
Sure. The more leverage you have, the easier that is, right? I probably could have, to a limit with JP Morgan, I could probably tell me, you owe me $100,000. Now, could I have gotten it? It's hard to bully JP Morgan, probably not. But because I had created so much leverage,
right,
not only leverage in what I was going to do, but that I would do it 5 minutes later. Like if I called the Wall Street Journal 5 minutes later and said, this is what's happening. Like, I don't know what was going to happen. They didn't like I had created a lot of leverage, right? So the end result that you get, V, is dictated a lot by the leverage that you create, right? Now, I don't want to think that we all have to be jerks. I'm not talking about that the relationship doesn't matter. I'm not talking about that you can horse trade. I'll give you this. Hey, we'll cut your rent by 20%. We've done this in New York and in my family business in real estate. Hey, we'll cut your rent by 30%. You'll do this. Like, please don't interpret that you don't want to be a good business person and a good partner. But how many times have we come across in the midst of this COVID, somebody who you thought would have said, okay, we'll work on it together, either couldn't or didn't, right? You start with leverage and then your pie chart changes to leverage, leverage plus reasonable person, leverage plus we horse trade, right? All those different types of things. But that's what gets you to the quote unquote deal that you want. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about existing vendors in the midst of this, right? When I say vendors, I'm talking about everybody you write a check to. This is your contractors, this is your technology companies, this is even your employees, right? It's a difficult time for many people, right? And because it's a difficult time for many people, you've got to try to figure out, how do I reduce my expenses to the point where we get it to the right level so I can start to be successful and grow again. And I know for many of us, that's dire, like wake up in the middle of the night in the cold sweats. And for some, it's, hey, we're starting new businesses and we have the ability to start from scratch, right? And talk to vendors. So think of it this way. There's so much competition. We face this all, right? There's so much competition for everything that when you're talking to the marketing firm or you're talking to the elevator company in the bit, they're always fighting for your business and they're fighting against others. So that's where you can try to use these techniques like competition as leverage. You can also go back to your existing vendors and say, hey, we all know the situation that everybody faces. I know I pay you $10 today. I need to pay you $5, right? And if I don't pay you $5, I'm going to have to leave. Now, leaving depends on how long your contract is. It depends on, do you have provisions in your contract that can get you out, right? But one of the other techniques that people are using more and more these days is not signing long-term contracts. If you want my business, you have to perform month to month, right? And that way you really show up every month. I'm not going to sign a year contract because I want to see you perform first. And again, these are not absolutes. Okay, so go back to your existing vendors and say, listen, I like the service, but we can't do it at the current level. And we'd like to have you reduce it to X. If you can't reduce it to X, either now or when we're in the future, we're going to have to leave. Okay. Now, think about when we are on the other side of that conversation. What would we do? Most of us would say, there's a couple ways we could respond. We could say, no way, we have a contract, you have to pay 10, and if you don't pay 10, I'll sue you. Okay, that can happen. But many of us would say, okay, not great, but that makes sense to me. Let me figure out, right, how to do it. Let me figure out how to work something out that I can still keep this client or this customer, but I rework it in a way that makes more sense. Okay, so you go to your company and you say, I need to spread out the payments, I need to change the terms, right? But all against the backdrop of, listen, I may have to leave and go do it with somebody else if you're not able to do that. And I know sometimes we say to ourselves, oh my God, this is the only company in the world that can do this for me. That's never true. We can always find someone else. It may be a little hard, maybe a little painful, but if you have to get your business from 10 to 5 in expenses, right, you absolutely have to be able to negotiate with vendors to be able to do this. It is a little different now in the context of COVID, but not really, right? When you're hiring a marketing firm, right, the same types of issues exist. Okay. One other factor that I'll mention out there, which isn't so much negotiation as much as choice, is that there's a lot of vendors out there, like take an insurance company. If you go buy insurance, that you can buy insurance and spend $5,000 up front, or you can spend, $50 a month throughout the year. Yes, when you spend the $50 a month throughout the year, we can all do the math. You pay more, right? Essentially paying an interest rate, but sometimes that's worth it, right? Sometimes it's worth it, so you don't have to be out $5,000 today or whatever my number is, right? And you can spread it over time. Yes, it might cost you more in the end, but from a cash flow perspective, you may need more flexibility to take advantage of those things. Okay, that's not so much a negotiation as a choice, although the way you pay your vendors can also be part of the negotiation. Somebody may say, you owe me $5,000 a month for marketing services, but I'm going to pay you differently. right? I'm going to pay you at the end of the month. I'm going to pay you 60 days after the month. Okay. And those are all things that the more leverage you create, right, the more you have the opportunity to negotiate all these different slices of it. Okay. Um, this is not easy stuff. You know, I'm a corporate lawyer by trade. Like, this is easy for me. It's not easy all the time to do this, because these are all a bunch of moving parts in the context of this. Okay. Let me stop there. I have a bunch of other stuff I want to cover, but let me stop there for a second and see if there's any questions.
And I would also encourage folks, if you've had experience, especially in the last year, negotiating or dealing with this, would love to hear your kind of experience, or if anybody's dealing with this now.
Yep. Okay. So I'll keep plugging along. When you think about the challenges of business right now and how quickly businesses are growing, some businesses I know are doing terrifically under COVID. Many are struggling. Many are barely holding on. And there's a lot of people that are starting new businesses in the context of this. The way you want to set up your agreements with, frankly, everybody is to be as largely performance-based as they can be. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Let's take an employee. Okay, you have an employee. The employee says, I'd like you to pay me $60,000 to be this role. You might say to that employee, and a bonus of 10%, right? Pretty typical employee compensation. But what you might say is, okay, I'm looking at a lot of different people for this role. You, the person I'm talking to you right now, say you're good at this, and we think you might be good at this, whatever it is. We're going to structure compensation a little bit differently. We're going to say your base salary is $40,000 a year, and you're going to have metrics every month. And those metrics, if you hit them, which are X, right, specific, if you do okay, you'll earn your 60. And if you do better, you might even earn more than 60. But the point is, they're tied to performance, right? They're tied to the things you need to get done. So when you're negotiating, for example, with a marketing firm, probably one of the most prevalent activities that happens here is marketing firms come to early stage companies like all of us and say, I can increase your sales by 500%, and right, like all the stuff that we hear. And some of them are good and some are not that good, and it's hard to tell. When you're negotiating with a marketing firm, and this is actually one of the things people have asked of us at Lonely Entrepreneurs is, would you actually provide this service? Would you actually help us negotiate with marketing firms? Because it's so hard to figure out this, that, and the other thing. Here's something that you can use specifically for marketing firms. When you're interviewing them, ask them 3 things, okay? First and foremost, ask them to provide you with their 5 best results, okay? And whatever it is, it doesn't have to be exactly your type of business. It doesn't have to be your industry, the 5 best results, okay? Because really good marketing firms, when they give you their 5 best results, it will always be tied to revenue. They will always say, we increased this company's revenue by X. The ones that are not so good, remember, you're giving them the choice to give you their best 5, where they're like, we've been around for 18 years and we're great and our clients love them. Like, awesome, pick your best 5. When you see results are like, I increased your social media presence, like more fluffier things, that tells you something. You're like, wait a minute, I'm asking, you're giving us your 5 best results. You've been here for 18 years and you can't give us 5 results that actually increase revenue for somebody. So that's one technique, okay? The second technique is to say, what percentage of your compensation are you willing to tie to results? And when I say tie to results, I'm talking about actual results. Right? So, hey, I was going to charge you $5,000 a month for marketing services. We're not going to pay you $5,000 a month. You've said you want to be a partner. You've said you want to be results oriented. Great. What percentage of that $5,000 are you willing to tie to results? Right? And that's, you find out a lot very quickly. If somebody says we'll tie 1% to results, well, you're not really tying. Okay. And again, just like the employee, you would say, we'll pay you $2,500 a month, and then we'll tie results that will allow you not to only earn your 5, but to earn 6 or 7. Okay. And don't get me wrong, it can't always be 50%. You've got to be reasonable. People have to commit time and effort, but you need to tie as big a percentage of the contracts you have with vendors, and especially people like marketing vendors, to results. Okay. So first is ask them for their 5 best results. Secondly is ask them how much they're going to tie to results. And then that's what you put in your contract. And then thirdly is ask them for 3 references of clients that left them. Okay. And you're going to get some reactions, right? If they're a great firm, clients leave all the time for perfectly good reasons. They outgrow a marketing firm, they bring it in-house, right? The answer you're looking for is, of course, no problem, happy to, right? The answer that you don't want to hear is, well, we don't really think it's appropriate, or, well, they left because they ran out of budget and couldn't afford us. You're like, yeah, for whatever reason they left, happy to talk to them, right? Because really good companies and really good vendors, they have clients that leave, but they leave for the right reasons. The ones that really perform don't leave. Unless you have things like, hey, we brought marketing in-house and we don't need an outside agency anymore. Okay. But just by hearing the responses to what are your top 5 results, and hearing the responses to will you tie things to results, and hearing the responses to can you give me 3 clients, tells you a lot about how much they're actually going to perform for you. Okay. This is a little more relevant to marketing and PR and some of those other services. Okay. But the same types of ideas about the way to negotiate with potential new vendors, right, can set you up for success.
And I think Gia has a question.
Yes, my questions goes back to when you were talking about like the employer-employee relationship, because right now, I mean, the leveraging is great for the employee because I'm fighting like unemployment and the extra payments with that, and just it's really a challenging time for even when I go to some of the temp agencies for them to even secure someone, because my leveraging power has been reduced a lot by the pandemic, surprisingly. So just some suggestions on that.
Yeah. And listen, there are times when you're on the other side of the leverage, right? And this also helps you try to figure out to be better in those circumstances. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you go out and you want to pay somebody $50,000 to be a grant writer. I'm making something up. And let's say there's a huge demand for grant writers, right? And you feel like when you're interviewing all these grant writers for like a nonprofit, they want more. It's hard to hold them accountable. So maybe you change. Maybe you say, okay, there's a bunch of college grads that are coming right out of college right now. Many of them, unfortunately, don't have job opportunities. So maybe what I do is I go to them. They won't have the same level of experience, but maybe I could hire 2 of them, right? Or maybe 1 plus, and they will be super motivated and aligned, right? They will be like, oh, so if I got paid $35,000 a year right now, I don't have great job prospects, and I'll be highly motivated. I'll learn quickly. I'll really dive into it. So a lot of times, Gia, when you're facing a pool like you're facing now, sometimes you have to go to a different pool, right? So take, for example, and again, I don't know the specific job, but take, for example, your example of, okay, here's where I normally go. Think about how many moms have either been moms for a while and they haven't been in the workforce, or unfortunately, because of COVID, were forced to kind of leave their jobs because they have children at home and stuff like that. You might find moms that are overqualified. They may not want to work full time, but they might say, yeah, I'd work 4 hours a day if I could do it from home, and I'd be highly motivated to do it. And in that case, it's actually hard for those moms to find jobs because they've left the workforce and they need the flexibility of being home with kids. So this is where the entrepreneurial creativity comes into place. Gia, what kind of job are you recruiting for?
Um, office slash bookkeeper, and typically, we have a local college, ISU in Bloomington, where we get interns from. We've gotten interns from Robert Morris, and they normally end up staying on. And we've gotten retired accounting slash bookkeeping people. So those are definitely avenues that normally they're very resourceful. But at this time, that hasn't worked as well. And it's more, again, office, more, getting the client in, getting all their paperwork and files and everything, and then light bookkeeping with some kind of processing as well. So that's been the most challenging. And again, it's because it's not the 35, 40, $50,000 a year jobs. It's more of the maybe 12 to $15 an hour type jobs. And so again, because I just took it and said, okay, well, even if someone didn't work and then they had the unemployment and divide that, it's just, that's been my whole issue. So it's lose some income in-house to be more, I guess, appealing, or wear 50 hats and work day and night, which is what I don't want to do, but I'm having to do.
No, I understand, but
because of the pool being so small.
You just got to find people that haven't gone from being employed to unemployed, so that math makes more sense, right? You just got to go to, and don't think of it. Where are you located?
Peoria.
Don't think of it as it's got to be in Peoria, right? Because we've all learned, right? We can get this anywhere.
Oh,
maybe not completely anywhere. So think about another college, right? Think about other opportunities. So let's put it this way. If we went out in the world and said, are there lots of people out there that have those skills that are looking for jobs? 100%, no doubt. If you went on to Upwork, right? I don't know for those of you who are familiar with like Upwork, it's a site where you can put up jobs and you get people from all over the world, right? Including in the US that will bid for those jobs. If you went on Indeed or, one of these other job sites and put up bookkeeper, you'll get thousands.
Indeed, Facebook, LinkedIn.
You'll get people. You just can't get people that have gone from being employed to unemployed to get an unemployment check.
Yeah.
So you guys can probably see that a lot of the things we're talking about here require creativity.
Mm-hmm.
They require you to think, I can't just go next door to Peoria, right? And sometimes they require you to say, okay, like I might have to take a college finance person that doesn't have all the experience I need them, but I can teach them, right? And those aren't ideal, but that's just the nature of the beast. You just have to think outside your box. There are groups of people that for a job are unmotivated. There's a bunch of other people for the same job that are highly motivated, right? The key is how do you find them, right? Certainly in certain industries where, people have gone on unemployment and that number makes more sense for them to take the unemployment, not come back to work, especially when you have things like childcare and transportation and all that kind of stuff. You got to say to yourself, okay, I've got this pool of people. How do I go identify that pool of people in a bookkeeping or in a restaurant, or like, how do I find a pool of people that need and want the work that didn't come off of work? And that requires searching and creativity.
Okay, and one more question in regards to that. So, because I had an independent contractor, but then they got the PPP, so they're doing less things, and so, but so what would be, I guess, my bargaining tool to someone? How can I mean, you shaped it in the sense of marketing, or even in a sense of vendor. But what can I do to tie it to performance to maybe come up to the next level, but it not be a loss for us because the work may be just minimal or average?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, and I like the way you're thinking about it in terms of marketing, because a lot of times engaging with employees is marketing. You're trying to get them to understand why you. So what you can do is tie bonuses to specific projects. Right. So I want you to put in place a new system for onboarding clients. That happens in 30 days. If you do that in 30 days, I'll give you a bonus of X. Okay, so you tie it. The other thing is the promise of long-term employment. The issue that you're talking about right now is going to be gone in 3 or 6 months. In 3 or 6 months, right? The people that are saying, and listen, you understand, a lot of the folks here, right, are moms and parents. We understand the reality. The reality is it's not a bad thing. The reality is just that it just makes more sense to be, and I need to be at home with children and homeschool, and all the, online learning. So it's all legit. But in a couple of months, this is all gone. It may be 3 months, it may be 6 months and 9 months, but people are going to be looking for full-time employment. So what you want to say to them is, listen, we want this to be a full-time role, right? At some point in time, that is our goal here, right? So the people that show up then in 3 months or 6 months, those aren't going to be people that get the full-time role, right? The full-time role is going to be people that engage with us now, right? So what you're trying to do is to tie it to something that benefits them in the hopefully not too distant future. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. And thank you so much. And unfortunately, by that time I'm out of my high season, which is tax season, when I really but yeah.
So so I would say pay a little more now, like pay a little more now if you can get people in the door, tie it to some projects. I mean, you can see that we're always both on both sides of kind of the leverage seesaw. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. You can probably tell that this idea of leverage, it doesn't matter whether you're talking to JP Morgan about 40 billion or you're talking about $4 an hour, the same concepts apply, right? You need to be able to come to the table with the opportunity to set yourself up for success. A lot of people, I'm sorry, Victoria, let me stop for a second. Other questions that have come in before I keep going?
No, you answer them as we were going along. So I'm
okay.
good.
One thing I want to make sure that everybody has access to, I alluded to it before, was that we created this entrepreneur survival guide a while back. And each week we did a topic. One of the topics we did was specifically about negotiating with creditors during a crisis. So we'll make sure that have everybody has links to that, which I think can be super helpful. And there's I believe there's another video that we did, a fireside chat around that. So cool. So hopefully you walk away with a couple of these concepts that you can apply in your business. And when you think about starting new businesses, which I know a lot of the folks here are doing, you're in a pretty good position, right? Because in most parts of the country, not all parts, but in most parts of the country, there are, store vacancies, and so the opportunity to start new, like if you have a restaurant, you have an existing cost structure, you have to renegotiate, right? Renegotiate rent, right? Renegotiate all of this stuff, employee compensation, like all these things to line it up to be successful. But if you're starting a new business, you're starting with a clean slate, right? And in some cases, not all, you have a lot more opportunity to set your cost structure up to be successful, right? So if I were to say, is it better to have an existing business, an existing restaurant, or start a new restaurant in New York City, for example? It's better to start a new restaurant because I get to start with a blank slate and I get to go to a landlord and say, not, I was paying 10 and I need to pay 7 and negotiating all that. But hi, I want to start a new restaurant, but I can go to one of 10 places. So I want to pay 5. Okay. So sometimes, right, the creation of that leverage is a function of the market conditions you're around. I'm speaking to New York real estate. Obviously, these same conditions, unfortunately for us as a country, exist in many, many places throughout the country. But those are the types of things that you have to evaluate. It's not so easy to just shut down a business, and sometimes it's very emotional to shut down a business. So I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm saying that these are all the conditions that set you up for success and give you the ability to negotiate with different creditors. Remember, there are a lot of companies out there that want your business. Okay. And because they want your business, you have to be good at setting up those relationships that are at the right dollar levels, the right length of your contract, and also the right level of accountability to results, right? That sets you up for the best chance of success. Okay. Victoria, I don't know if you got this comment, but I just got a comment from any suggestions on how to vet the freelancers you find on Fiverr or Upwork? Listen, anytime you evaluate vendor, what vendor comes to the table that says we're not great, we don't have the best prices, we don't do it, right? So that's why there's a couple of things you do. I gave you an example of a couple of things to ask a marketing vendor. The other thing you can do is give them exercises, right? And what do I mean by exercise? Let's say you're hiring somebody to do bookkeeping, right? You'd say, great. You'd say, here's our problems, right? Give me a one pager on what you do, right? And you have a day to complete it. Don't give them a week where they can Google it and talk to their friends and right, give them a day. And say in a day, come back to you. And what you will see is a very broad range of capability, right? I'm a videographer, right? And I create videos and we create amazing videos. Awesome. Here's what I would say. Here's an idea. I want one page. Tell me what you would do, right? And you'll read those. And when you read those, because they can say whatever they want, they're all going to have portfolios of videos. They're all going to like who doesn't, right? They're all going to say our clients love us and make them show you their capability in a small period of time. So think about what you get when you send to the videographer. One pager is going to be really standard. Another one pager will be, they will actually have looked into your business a little bit. They'll say, hey, you have this type of business and here's how I would apply it. And then somebody will write a storyboard for you, right? Somebody will write the whole thing for you and say, this is how I would do it. And they'll say, do I have to be limited to one page? Right. And by learning and seeing those, right, you'll garner a lot about how good they are. Everybody says they're great. Everybody says they're inexpensive. Everybody says their clients love them. Right? And in many cases it's true, but it's very difficult to differentiate between one and the other. I hope that's helpful.
Great.
Cool. That was the one that I had. If you don't have any, I'll keep plugging along.
Keep going.
Okay. Let me stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions, comments, specific circumstances of their business they want to talk about? Okay, cool. I'll keep going. One of the things that happens with us as early stage companies is we have a lot of reliance on one particular vendor, one particular employee, right? And that puts us in a very uncomfortable situation when it comes to not just negotiating, but running our businesses, right? And the most difficult part of this is you're already overwhelmed with all the things you're doing in your business. And here's what I'm going to say to you. You always have to have backup and you always have to have bench strength, as they would like to say in the sports arena, right? And everybody says, well, wait a minute, I can't create bench strength. I'm busy enough doing X. But here's the thing. If you are thinking about, okay, I'm completely dependent on this employee and this employee shows up only half the time, well, your business is getting hurt. You have to be working, and I'm talking about in the context of employees, but the same thing could be true for vendors, right? You always have to allocate a little bit of your time to saying, okay, how am I interviewing employees all the time so when my bookkeeper leaves or my bookkeeper gets a better job, I'll be okay. Okay. You just got to take a little bit of your time and have that always be doing that. Okay. We had a client that had a huge distribution deal with Whole Foods. And in the midst of COVID, their manufacturer that made all these products for them called them up and said, we're going to have to cut you off in 30 days. Imagine that. Imagine having all these products in Whole Foods across the country that is made specifically at this facility. And they call you up and say, and the contract that we negotiated with them required them to give us 120 days. And they're like, listen, COVID's COVID. We can talk about the contract. Sue us, don't sue us. We have to move on from this business. So you're like, okay, I can sue them, I guess. This client can sue them. But at the end of the day, I don't have product in 30 days. Okay. Yeah. Now, what we had done, which is good, is we had been talking to others, right? So we already had relationships and we were already doing some of our product with some others to try to deal with this risk. So in any event, your ability to create great vendor relationships a lot of times is by having backup of employees, backup of vendors. It takes time, it's hard, but it's something that's really important to put yourself in the position to have great relationships.
Great. And Michael, we did just get another question. Advice on building a commission-based sales team.
Sure. When it comes to, you guys probably can tell what my answer would be, right? You want to make it as incentive driven as possible, right? However, when you have only commission-based salespeople, you're 5 minutes away from them getting a phone call, from getting a job where somebody pays them a base salary plus. So sometimes commission-based salespeople are good. And sometimes commission-based salespeople put you at risk because they could leave in 2 seconds. Okay. What you generally try to do is to tie it to results. So that might mean low base salary, commission tied to the results they achieve. It might be low base salary plus what they call a draw, right? Which is you give them an advance, right? On commissions, right? Where you say, okay, I'll give you an advance of some dollars because it's going to take you 3 months to get up to speed, to know our industry, or to do that. But as much as possible, right? You want to tie, again, the performance, especially of sales. Sales is easier than marketing and technology and other roles because there's very definable results, which is, do you generate actual revenue? Okay, so you have to align it the best you can to results, but don't overdo it because you want those people to come to work and be motivated every day. Think about if we all worked only on commission, right? That's hard. But if we knew we had a base and maybe we got a little extra draw of money while we were getting up to speed, and then your commission provided you with upside, that's how to structure those. And you structure it across the board so you see pretty quickly how people perform against each other, especially if you're talking about building out a large sales team. Okay. So let me summarize a little bit. When it comes to negotiating with anybody really, but certainly creditors and vendors, it starts with leverage. Okay. Sometimes leverage you have to create, sometimes leverage that already exists there. When it comes to all the different compensation that you have, you always want to tie them as much to results as possible. That's not just a concept, that's reality. And when you're interviewing, I gave you a couple of techniques, ask them for the results they got in the past, ask them how much they're going to tie to results, and ask them clients that have left. I did that in the context of marketing firms. That can be for a lot of different types of vendors, okay, that you try to vet. When it comes to your existing vendors that you may want to negotiate with, sometimes you can, talk to them about, listen, I've got to leave unless you do this for me. Sometimes you can talk about these financing programs that I mentioned, like, hey, we can spread this out over a year, or different payment options. Hey, I'll still owe you if they're not willing to negotiate, but I need you to help me spread it out because of the times that we're in. If we don't win, if we're not successful, you're not going to be successful, right? But we kind of go from there. Okay. Let me end on the survey. So please take the survey. It helps us help you. Remember, you can get your gift card. I just got a note. I'm gonna butcher your name. Barbette Joy. Where are you? Where are you located?
Good morning. I'm in Dallas, Texas.
All right. Dallas or outside, or?
No, smack dab in the middle.
Smack dab in the middle. I'm a Giant fan, so we're not going to get along. You just did the survey. How long did it take for you to complete?
It didn't take long at all. Maybe about 4 or 5 minutes. Not
Awesome. So thank you. So thank you so much for doing that. If you guys can all do that, Victoria will make sure she has the link and the QR code, and it won't just be here in these calls. It'll be available in the community and other places. So if you miss it here, we can get it done. But thank you very much for doing it. While we have you for a second, what kind of business do you have?
Actually, I want to, it's not a established business. And I learned that after taking this survey, how much work I need to do. But I want to build websites. I currently have 3 domains that I'm learning how to build using different themes and different platforms. And also, one of the sites, its objective is to sell Young Living essential oils online. So I'm because I'm not interested in the MLM portion. I'm just interested in selling the product because that's what resonates more with me. And I would like to. We have 3 different type of memberships, and I would like to just build a client base that does the auto monthly.
Yep.
But if they want to get into the business, I can always direct them to someone in the upline. Yep. But my objective is just to sell the product because that's what resonates with me.
Awesome. Listen, and you know what we'll do one day, which would be super fun, is we'll just have, because we have people, I know we have people from London and people from Dallas and people, is we should just hear about everybody's businesses, right? Because the challenges that you face are they're not exact, but they're very similar to the challenges that others face. How do I set my goals, establish priorities, create the strategies that are going to help that happen? We'd be happy to connect with you offline. But thank you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for connecting with us from Dallas. So one last question: who's the furthest away? So I know that we have some folks from close to London. Anybody else from outside the U.S.? I think Branson might be our winner because I don't know if we have. I know we occasionally will get some people from parts of Africa and Australia, but I think for the most part we may have in the U.S. So these hours go so fast. Hopefully this was helpful for everyone. Remember, these links of our sessions are all made available within the learning community, and we'll direct you to those as well. So not just this session, but all the sessions we have, the recordings are up usually within a couple of days. But I hope this was helpful, and think about this stuff as you're talking to some of your clients. And if there's any other questions that linger, we'll grab them and make sure we get back to everybody. So V, do you have anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, I posted the link in the chat for the survey, and also posted the link for the coaching session on negotiating also. So if you guys want to grab those, just click on them. And like Michael said, we're always here. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure to get to everybody.
Terrific. Thank you, V, and thank you everybody for your time. Have a terrific Friday.
Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.